Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
Today we're reviewing a very special movie, which we've been reviewing a lot of action movies on this channel now, and action shows and whatnot. And this is a movie that doesn't really feel like an action movie. It's both a love story and a bit of a melancholic tale. This is probably the most melancholic movie I can think of from the 70s, and it's ultimately a movie I think about poverty and depression. It has been said by other YouTubers that this movie's all about how poverty eats at a man's soul until there's nothing really left. And I do agree with that, but this is a movie where if it doesn't almost pull tears from your eyes or doesn't move you and make you wonder, then I don't think that I don't think it's something wrong with the movie, but there's something wrong with you, because this is an underdog tale, but it's also a commentary. And at the outset of the film, Rocky's not much of a fighter. He's fought 64 matches, won most of them, typically by knockout, so he's a really, really good fighter. He fights Spider Rico, a Mexican, at the start, who says, you just got lucky. And he seems well enough. He doesn't answer Spider Rico's taunts, just simply goes home and looks at a portrait of Rocky Marciano, the greatest boxer in history. And Marciano kind of looms large in this film. Marciano was a man who came from poverty and built himself up from nothing. And he was Italian, but the poster seems to cast a shadow over Rocky Balboa, who has a similar name as him, although his name was originally Robert, not Rocky. But Balboa seems obviously depressed by the similarities between them and how he's never managed to ever become as eloquent a speaker as Marciano, who was very eloquent, or get as far as Marciano did. Now, Marciano, by the time he was 30, I think he was a wildly successful boxer, from what I understand it. Balboa is essentially what we might term today an incel. And he's utterly alone. His parents are dead. He's poor, dirt poor, can't keep a job, and he's just utterly bereft. Now, he practices his jokes because this is the only time he ever feels joy in his day, is when he's visiting the pet shop where the girl of his dreams, Adrienne, works. We find out in a follow-up scene that Rocky is essentially a leg breaker for a local mobster, but he doesn't really have the heart to break the thumbs of the one guy he's been cast upon. And this gets him a very bitter scolding from his boss, and Rocky ends up having an argument with the guy's driver, Buddy, before Rocky goes off to the gym where he discovers his locker has been taken from him and given to another guy, gets into a fight with Mickey, the head of the gym. Mick and Rocky have a bit of a bitter relationship. Now, throughout the movie, we see that Mick doesn't have much love for Rocky at the start, because he honestly thinks Rocky had the potential. You could have been something, but instead you became a leg breaker for a second-rate loan shark. And you have Rocky. It's a living. It's a wasted life, is what Mickey tells him. And you can't help but agree with Mickey. But on the other hand, every decision he makes seems to just almost have a spitefulness to it, directed against Rocky. So you can't help but also feel for Rocky. Rocky's every action is essentially a cry for help, and yet Mick doesn't care, because Rocky, in his words, was a contender, but, you know, he stopped contending, so to speak. And when Rocky, at the start, tells him, you know, you should have seen me, I did great the other night. Yeah, well, Spider Rico's a bum, says Mick. Mickey has no respect for Rocky. And it's rather sorrowful. Rocky visits Adrian at the pet shop throughout the movie, and at the start, he tries a few lame jokes, particularly about shell shock, which are pretty funny. And the scene is tinted with a lot of melancholy. With Polly, of course, at the bar, as always, because he's a drunk. But we also get, in the first scene with Polly, the knowledge that Polly wants to be involved with the mob to make money and ends meet. And Rocky is honestly scared for Polly and doesn't want him anywhere near the mob, which he's protecting Polly from them. And that's a great thing, but Polly grows to resent this throughout the film. And so you have this kind of simmering anger on Polly's part towards Rocky, where he thinks that Rocky's keeping him from the good times and taking advantage of him. When in reality, Rocky's trying to protect Polly. In turn, we also get at the bar the funny joke when the bartender smack talks Apollo, who's one of Rocky's heroes, and Rocky just tells him, when have you ever taken a shot? You want me to take a shot? Fine, I'll take a shot. And the bartender pours himself a shot, which is hilarious. I love that joke. But while life is ultimately impossible and just downright nasty for Rocky, for Apollo, life's pretty good. He's rich, married to a lovely woman who adores him and he adores. He's got a great manager. He knows the business better than anyone else, better even than Mick. And everybody generally loves and adores Apollo. So Apollo, though, runs into his first real trouble in life when his opponents are just going, we're not fighting you. Now, he's looking for a fight on January 1st for the 200th celebration of the U.S., but nobody will take him up. Oh, well, he cracked his knuckles, or he's off in France fighting, or, you know, he's only gained 50 pounds. And Apollo's frustrated and decides, okay, fine, we'll take advantage of the title of Land of Opportunity by giving an unknown at the shot. Now, this had been done before in boxing history, and Apollo decides, all right, I'll do it, because I'm desperate at this point. Whereupon he ends up looking through a book with a list of fighters from Philadelphia, and he's asked by Jargons, one of the main organizer for the event, just what are you looking for? And it's not till he happens into the I section that he finds what he's looking for. The Italian Stallion, Rocky Balboa, a title that Rocky came up with while he was eating and thought it was a good joke. Turns out the joke later, as he puts it in Rocky 6, backfires on Apollo and the organizer and whatnot in grand style. That said, while Apollo is busy living at large and struggling to find an opponent because he's too good, because he's in his prime here, we've got Rocky, who is just trying to get a date for Thanksgiving. And AVGN once said that it's in the ice ring scene that we really start to warm up to Rocky. And it's about this time that Adrienne starts to warm up to him. So, yeah, I do agree with that. This is about the time when you really feel that, yeah, Rocky's a great guy. By this time, he's done things like escort little Marie, back to her home, despite her saying, screw you, creepo. A great insult. And he's done things like refuse to break a guy's thumbs. And he also didn't feel comfortable with the abuse Polly was heaping on Adrienne, calling her a loser and generally kicking her out of the house and just being otherwise utterly nasty towards her. And Rocky ends up revealing in the ice rink scene that he first started fighting when he was about 15 years old. He's fought 64 matches, but then and he's never broken his nose, and this is something he brags about. See this nose? Never been broken. I've had guys bite it, try to chew on it, kick it, punch it, never broke it. And then he ends up revealing what really lies under the surface, where his father used to tell him, "You don't have much of a mind, so you better, make use of your body." And the reason I struggle there is just, it's something I have heard before, because, well, we've pretty much been told when we were growing up, you're not much of a looker, so better work on those brains of yours, if they're worth anything. I remember that insult. So the thing about abuse like this is it does stick with you, and it grinds you down. But then we find out Adrienne was always told by her mother, rather nastily, you don't have much of a body, so you better work on your brain and make sure you have a good mind. Which Adrienne's abuse is no less disheartening. And so we see here a thread that kind of links Adrienne and Rocky. And I think the reason there's such an attraction between the two is that they see the same abuse and sorrow in each other that they themselves have experienced. And it speaks to the depth of Stallone's writing and his ability to see into the human soul. Because the greatest of writers see into human nature and what grinds it down and what also builds it up. And know how to inspire the human spirit, but also know how to depress it. And that's what Stallone is doing here. So, yeah, that said, later the kissing scene, humorously, Talia Shire, the actress of Adrienne, apparently had the flu. And so, both her and Stallone were nervous about the kiss scene because Stallone did not want to catch the flu. But they only had this one chance to shoot the scene. He did not catch the flu, apparently, from what I understand it. And he did kiss her. But apparently he did end up developing, according to him, a slight crush on her for a bit when he took the glasses and the toque off her head. Because he realized how pretty she was. Because, the glasses and the toque were just there to, make her look less pretty. And she is certainly pretty. Not beautiful in the way a lot of Hollywood starlets are, but just pretty, and just ultimately she looks like a nice person. Anything you want to add about the rink scene?
It is interesting how that really detail.
It really gets to you, doesn't it?
It gets to you. You see that for a while it does seem like Adrienne
is trying to keep distance.
Keep distance. But when Rocky comments about
the abuse he suffered,
that's when she really pulls in and starts to open up with him, because
she realizes he's harmless.
He's harmless, he's friendly, he's in pain, and he just wants someone. And
to understand. Yeah.
And he's attracted to her. And that's when she realizes that she shouldn't be so judgmental. There's a reason why Rocky can have a fondness for animals, because people of Rocky's intellect, often they find kinship in animals, and a lot of animals do like such people.
Yeah. The sad thing about Rocky is that he was aware she was apprehensive about him for a long time in the film, and so he complained sometimes to Paulie earlier on. But he admits in number 6 he just wanted her to trust him. And the thing about when he invites her into his room, she does come to trust him. And then, he seduces her. And the seduction scene is almost humorous.
It's humorously awkward.
Yeah, but I imagine in real life it would, well, such a scene, if you were to walk in on such a scene, it would probably end up being that awkward. Or if you were to observe it, it'd be that awkward. And we got Mickey at the gym who was apparently looking for Rocky, and this is when he has the argument with Rocky, but he also ends up giving him the information that he thinks Apollo's looking for a sparring partner. And not even the information that the world champion, the best boxer in the world, is interested in his student isn't enough to raise Mickey's interest in Rocky, which is just wow. But then you got Jargon's meeting with Rocky. No, this is the chance of a lifetime. You can't pass it by. And Jargon's is right. And though Rocky initially turns it down, just being in a state of shock, he accepts. And then we get Rocky on the news, which is funny, where he goes, "Yo, Adrian, it's me." But on the other hand, that's the funny part of that scene, with Adrian just obviously cracking up and amused. And she does admit that she did feel a little put up on and embarrassed. But she's flattered that Rocky cared enough about her to do that for her. That said, we got here also a scene where we see into Rocky's psychology when he says, "No, it didn't bother me none," when the announcers were treating him like he was dumb. They were treating him like garbage. And they were talking down to him in such a way, it was subtle, but you really get the sense that, do they have any respect for him? They think he's worthless. And that he's not even a bug under their boot. And then he admits right outside the house, in a quiet voice, "It did bother me." And it's a horrible
I've
scene.
spoken to people who are a lot less intelligent, like average IQ, and they don't like it when others talk above them because it feels condescending.
Okay.
And
But when you talk down to them like that, with people who are not as intelligent as, say, average IQ, like you said, I think that grinds them down even more because they feel smaller. And I think that's the intent a lot of the time that some people have towards those who are not as smart. Other times it's accidental. And, like, no matter what, everyone's going to be talked to in that manner to an extent at some point in their lives. But the way it was done and the public manner in which it was done to Rocky is just heart-wrenching. But on the other hand, Rocky is later shown a bit of an act of kindness by his former mob boss, who ends up loaning him $500 to train with. And sees it as, use it however you want. And that's the thing. This loan shark also gave Rocky earlier in the movie $50 for his date with Adrienne, with Rocky keeping most of the money. But this loan shark, evidently, he has Rocky followed, and it's creepy when he reveals he knows Adrienne's name. Yeah, that's scary. But on the other hand, when Rocky decides he's leaving the business, he doesn't go after Rocky or Adrienne. He just simply washes his hands and says, "Okay, fine, here's $500 out of my own pocket. Good luck. I like you, kid."
it's like, "You're a good kid. I don't think you should have been in this business."
But whatever. And Rocky asks him, "Will you show up for the match?" And he says, "Yeah, of course. Front row seat every match from now on," or something to that effect. And it's actually a really nice scene. Mick, though, comes to visit Rocky. And this scene, and we're going by scene because there's a lot to analyze and unpack with this movie. Because we do want to discuss every scene, and this is a scene that is really loaded. At the start of it, you've got Mick, who tries to smooth talk and impress Rocky. Rocky's not impressed and doesn't want to talk to him. Mickey is a little put off, but keeps pushing forward. And it's only later when Rocky starts to throw darts that he seems to realize Rocky's angry with him. And you can see that he doesn't know why Rocky's angry. When, that's not terribly bright on his part. But he reveals that he was taken advantage of, he was robbed, he was mistreated because he didn't have a manager. And that a good manager is half, of the reason why certain boxers succeed. And so you have him stepping forward and saying, I want to be your manager, kid. I want to take care of you. I want to be your manager. A lot of people say this isn't a moment of great compassion on Mickey's part. I don't think it is.
In a way, it's opportunistic.
Because Rocky suddenly now is in the limelight. And now he has a shot at the title. And this is the sort of thing that Mick does reveal later. I've been waiting 50 years for this sort of thing. Because here, he's trying to take advantage of Rocky, in a way. But he is going to protect Rocky later. But in this moment, he's not protecting Rocky. He's wanting to cash in on Rocky to an extent. And Rocky tells him, 10 years, we've basically been working together. And not once have you asked me how I'm doing or offered to take care of me or help me out. Well, why didn't you just ask? Why didn't you ask? I did! You didn't want anything to do with me, is essentially Rocky's response to him. At which point, Mick pretends to leave, doesn't, and Rocky goes back into the bathroom. Mick leaves hurt, but I think Mick also realizes how far he pushed Rocky and that he did do something wrong here, in a way. And yes, he's hurt by Rocky's rejection because he got his heart finally invested a little in this offer, but he also realizes that the way in which he had been treating Rocky all these years was monstrous. And so it's a scene of a great deal of guilt. And in turn, Rocky ends up throwing a tantrum. I don't know what other word to use in English, but he ends up shrieking like a maniac and just saying, oh, yeah, this is a great opportunity, but it's going to be my face that's done in, and, and he just unloads. And you've got Rocky who says, like, it's going to be my face busted in, and, and this is where you can't help but kind of feel a little heartbroken for Rocky. The years of abuse have built up, and here this is years of pain and sorrow and anger just being torn out of him. And yet there's a beautiful moment when Mick's walking away broken. Rocky comes out and hurries after him and wraps his arm around his shoulders, apologizing and begging for Mick to become his manager. And you see Rocky kind of pleased and offer a handshake, and the bad blood is over. I think that both men needed to kind of air their dirty laundry and whatnot, and for Mick to realize that he had been a bit of an abusive father in a way. As an archetype, Mick is the magician, but he's also in a way the father figure here. An abusive father figure who has to realize that he had been abusing his son, his thematic son, and that he needed to make peace and kind of atone for what he's done. That said, Mickey later is still a little rough around the edges. He's Mickey, I love him. But in turn, Rocky was needing to unload everything he had been feeling. And I think that, for one thing, Rocky is a character who needed a Mr. Miyagi. You know what I mean? Like, he needed someone like that, but instead he got Mick. And don't get me wrong, Mickey does a lot of good for Rocky. But for years he didn't. And so Rocky's this broken shell of a man, and there's just something endearing about Rocky Balboa. And we, of course, get him also doing things like drinking 5 eggs in the morning, him beating meat. There's a little pun to be said about that. Him exercising, not being able to make it up the stairs and the main city hall, I think, until the end, or right before the end. And he's given his dog, Stallone's dog, by Adrienne. How dare she give him Rocky's Sylvester Stallone's dog? That's Sylvester's dog. Anyways, you've got the interview in the meat shop, which is pretty. I like how you have Duke, who just he's watching it on the telly, and he goes, "Hey, champ, you might want to take a look at this guy that you're about to face off." And Apollo's more concerned with the business side. At which point, Duke says, "Looks like your guy means business here." "Yeah, I mean business. Hey, Shirley, can you get me another cup of coffee?" Not even paying attention. Because Apollo stopped looking at boxing as an art, instead is now looking at it as a business. And in that regard, he's already lost a fight in a way, because he's not thinking in terms... He's not even thinking about the fight.
I think that one thing that we could correlate between Apollo and Rocky is that Apollo is feeling a little bit more numb, so...
I think they're both lost in a way, but in a different way. The fame and glory has gone to Apollo's head.
And there's also the lack of proper opponent, that he's gotten bored with all of his rivals and foes. They decided to throw himself into business part.
Yes, and that's the problem. In turn, Rocky is, adrift because of too many difficulties in life. And, of course, after the scene, we get Adrienne defying Paulie, because it's kind of shown that it's now nearing Christmas, or at least by this time it's Christmas, and Paulie just goes nuts. And I just like how Adrienne screams at him like, "I am not a loser, and you make me feel like one." And that's really, really powerful. It's just, yeah, it's a very powerful scene. Like every scene in this movie is very, very powerful. And of course, we've got Paulie apologizing. We have a great training montage. We got Mickey being Mickey. Move your chicken rears!
It's like that cliche boxing manager coach.
Yeah. Which was started, I think, here. But we've also got Rocky the night before the match having one last heartbreaking scene where he goes to the ring and he looks at the posters and goes, "Hey, the boxers are all wrong." And you've got the organizer, Jargons, who's just smoking and just going, "It doesn't really matter. I'm sure you'll give us a good show." And the tone is very evidently very mocking and indifferent. And there's a coldness.
It's like not just Apollo, but everyone with Apollo are indifferent to all the boxing. It's just a business, a couple of faces just mashing on each other.
There's only one of them that seems to treat it seriously, and that's Duke, Apollo's manager. He looks at the boxing in a very serious light. The rest treat it like a game or a business, but Duke isn't, and that's very interesting. That said, I like how Rocky ends up returning to his apartment and says, I was nobody. And Adrienne tries to tell him no and give him platitudes. And he says, all I want to do is go the distance so that I know I'm not just some bum from the neighborhood. Which, I mean, no offense, but every man who's ever been poor or felt the weight of the world can well understand how Rocky's feeling. And just how utterly small he feels and insignificant.
That's the thing about Stallone. He always tries to bring up commentaries.
Yeah. In Rambo, it was about the veterans. Oh my gosh, that leg scene where you have Troutman who tells him, "It's over, Rambo! Nothing is over!" And then, you got Rambo who breaks down just, "I can't find my legs!" And that whole thing is just, dear gosh, that's just a knife in every man's heart, every person's heart.
And then here we deal with depression, how the weight of poverty deals with
grinds people down. And And you have also the different mindsets. You have Apollo as all these doctors and specialists checking him every little inch of his body, making sure he's okay. His wife's sitting in a corner, and then you have Rocky, meanwhile, who just crosses himself and starts praying before a sink, just before the fight. And Rocky is clearly just still nervous, still shaken, worried about his robe, worried about the fight, and just praying. And there's something endearing about the fact that, right before the biggest match of his life up to this moment, right before the moment when he's most terrified, he just drops to his knees and starts offering prayers. And it's often the poor who are probably the most pious because they have the most reason to be pious in the past 1 or 2 centuries. They have the most need for a miracle, in a way. Now, once upon a time, the wealthy were as pious as the poor in the medieval and pre-modern periods, but this sort of religious fervor and truly genuine sense of, like the ability to just drop to your knees and go, I need help.
Sometimes
There's part of me kind of thinks that there's something sad about how a lot of Western society has forgotten the value of just dropping to your knees and going, help me, to a higher power.
Because sometimes when you've got nothing left, all you can have that can keep yourself together is faith.
Yeah. And here, I think Rocky does need his faith. And apparently the producers wanted the scene where he says, all I want to do is go the distance. Cut. And I can't even imagine. Stallone had to fight to keep that scene in. And the prayer scene is very evidently an addition to that scene, I think. I don't think that scene would have been included today. But I think it's a sign of the times, the 70s, but it's a very, very beautiful moment. And then, of course, we get Rocky insanely worried and nervous. And then we've got an icebreaker. Because Apollo dresses up like George Washington, passes around coins and pennies and nickels to the crowd on the way to the ring. And I'm sorry, but this is one of the most endearing scenes I've ever seen in cinematic history. I love Apollo.
And with the entire depressing, the mood, and you have this showboater on a float just acting like a complete clown.
Oh my gosh, Carl Weathers just sells it.
And then you have Rocky.
It looks like a great big flag. Yeah, Mick, yeah.
Where even Rocky comments on how he looks like a clown.
Yeah, to an extent. I like how he's like, I want you! I want you! Like Uncle Sam in the old posters from the 40s. And you have Stallone. Rocky. Is he talking to me? If Mickey... Yes, he is. You have Mickey looking like he's trying to keep from laughing. It's such an endearing scene. And it's a really, really good scene. It really does help improve the mood. And we have, of course, the great fight with Apollo having no one's ever gone the distance with Apollo. And in the first round, Rocky lays him flat on the ground with a good left hook, I think. And this shows why you don't mess with a southpaw. And it's the first time you see Apollo slow down for a minute, where, he kind of gets up and goes. But for a moment, he's on the ground, and you have the count, and you just have Apollo blinking and going, did that just happen? It's almost like he's surprised to have taken that strong a hit so early.
And he didn't see that hit.
Yeah. But then as the fight progresses, it goes from Apollo feeling very cocky to, at one point, Apollo scared of approaching Rocky. And I like how near the end of the fight, you have Mickey just telling him, stay down! Because by this point, he has come to care for Rocky. In contrast to the beginning of the film, and he doesn't want Rocky to get hurt. But you have Rocky who decides, screw it, I'm all in, and pulls himself back up. And part of me, I remember this one video, I forget, I don't remember the link or which video it was, but where someone actually did the, what was it? It's not about how hard you're hit. It's about how hard you can take a hit and keep getting back up from Rocky 6, and stuck it here, that quote, where when Rocky's getting back up against Apollo. But it's interesting because Apollo then looks utterly flabbergasted and shocked and even scared. And when he does, this is the part when, he goes to approach, but he's very apprehensive. And Rocky cracks his ribs. Now, Apollo wins by a slim margin because of points, because he did hit Rocky more times. But it's pretty much a draw. And this ends up shocking the reporters and the announcers, because no one's ever gone the distance with Apollo Creed.
There's a reason why at some point during the match you have Duke that told Apollo, this
guy doesn't realize it's a darn show. He thinks it's a darn fight.
So you approach him as if it's a fight.
Yeah, it's just put an end to this and let's go home. And there's a scolding there, and there's a bit of anger on Duke's part towards Apollo, and you can hardly blame him. Like, Duke's been trying to Duke's role in this movie is that of Cassandra from Greek myths. He's basically just trying to tell Apollo, this is not a good idea, this is not a good idea. But nobody ever listens to Duke, at least in this film. And Rocky goes the distance, and this is the greatest underdog film probably in history, because he not only goes the distance, he conquers the distance. He conquers his depression. He conquers his sorrow and his melancholy. And at the end, rather than, basking in his obvious glory, he instead just screams, Adrian! Until she comes along. And Polly, of course, finds redemption, helping her distract the security, and helps her into the ring. And she embraces Rocky, and the two confess their love. This is a very heart-wrenching, heartwarming, heartbreaking movie all in one. And this movie is one we both saw this past year, like 2-3 times by now. And the first time for me was this year. I don't know about you.
It was this year.
Okay. Our dad loved this film. I do remember that. Our oldest brother loves this film. And I can see why. Overall, like, what do you think of how a lot of people apparently regard this as one of the greatest underdog stories of all times in cinematic history?
And that is a fair description, because in a way there are many people who are underdogs, but they need to be able to take
they need a shot, like, or a chance. And the thing is, this was Lady Luck suddenly smiling on Rocky. The first bit of the film is utterly depressing, and the second bit is, life pretty much trying to push Rocky forward and trying to say, here's your shot. You have a chance, kid. You have a chance, as Mickey tells him. But Rocky's scared, He lashes out at Mickey. He struggles to protect Adrienne from Polly at one point. He, at least emotionally, and he says, I was just a nobody from the neighborhood. I was just a nobody. I'm just a nobody. And all I want to do is go the distance, because nobody else has ever gone the distance with Apollo Creed. So that I know I'm not just some bum from the neighborhood. And honestly, your heart just aches for Rocky. And Stallone does a great job. The thing about Stallone is, contrary to what a lot of people think, he's an incredible character actor. He's one of the best character actors in the business. His work as Rocky in Rambo is incredible. And you look at, like, the entire First Blood movie is just a shockingly good movie and heart-wrenching movie.
He makes a lot of social commentaries, but not like how people think. He comments about veterans to treat them with respect. How the Vietnam veterans, how abused they were when they came back because of the war that even they didn't believe in.
Yeah.
But they did their duty, and they were abused when they came back, and their mental health
Took a nosedive.
took a nosedive, and no one wanted to take care of them.
And I think that the thing with Rocky Balboa is almost, in some ways, it's sadder because he's not a veteran, but he's supposed to be one of the boys. You know what I mean? Like, but nobody will give him a job except the mob. Okay, so the dog's signaling the end of the video, but I think here Stallone, like Rocky's supposed to be one of the boys. No one will give him a job except the mob. He's dirt poor. All he wants is a shot to be able to prove he can go the distance. And the only person who supports him is Adrienne. Because Rocky doesn't even believe in himself. And I think that's one major difference between him and Rambo. Rambo does believe in himself deep down. But it's just, he's also lost faith in a way and whatnot. Rambo's even sadder. No, like, that story is in some ways a lot more depressing. But the thing with Rocky is that Rocky, like, Rambo does want someone to believe in him, and he does. But I think with Rocky, he's lost the ability to have any faith in himself and any ability to believe he's worth anything. They're both dealing with depression, but in two different ways. They're both dealing with trauma in two different ways. One is a case of too much action and whatnot has happened in his life. The other is bereft of anything good that's happened in recent years or almost ever. And so, two very different stories that offer similar trauma in a way, if very different trauma at the same time. It's complicated. But this is honestly probably the best movie ever that deals with depression and conquering it.
And
so
it's easy to fall into
that trap. Yeah. Let's rate this movie. I'm going to say a 4.
Yeah, a 4.
This is probably the best movie of 1976.
Can't argue.
And it did not win awards, I think. I think it won maybe 1. And that's just mind-numbing how this movie should have won Best Picture and Best, or like at least Best Direction or whatever, and Best Screenplay. I think it won Best Screenplay, but it should have won more awards. Maybe 3 or 4. Or Best Acting on Stallone's part, because this is a great movie. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Rocky smashing his depression to itty bitty pieces.